Welcome to Unit 3 and 4, the overview of the elements and principles of art and design. You will be using these two units, Unit 3 and 4, as a basis for most of your design decisions this trimester. These two units fulfill two learning targets. The first is analyze how the elements of visual art include color, line, shape, value, form, texture, and space, and the principles such as repetition, pattern, emphasis, contrast, and balance are combined to communicate meaning in a creation of, presentation of, or response to visual artworks. The second learning target is to evaluate how the principles of visual art such as repetition, pattern, emphasis, contrast, and balance are used in the creation of, presentation of, or response to visual artworks. These two learning targets are two of the major targets that fulfill the art standard. First, we have to start talking about the elements of art. The elements of art are really the building blocks of all art making. You could say that art was really the first language. Before written language, there was drawing. For instance, the caves of Lascaux, which are actually 17,300 years old, contain the best known Upper Paleolithic art images. These would be the images that would be images of bulls, things that they hunted. These were on the caves before written language was even found. So you can really say that the elements of art, the ones that are going to be following in this presentation, are really the building blocks of the first language, and that's art. So what are the elements of art? There's actually 5 elements of art, the first of which is line. Without line, or a mark or stroke that is longer than it is wide, you can't really have any sort of image. A line can be both vertical or horizontal. It can be curved or straight, thick or thin. It can have a feeling. You can have a diagonal line, you can have jagged lines, you can have curved lines. That is the first element. The second element of art is shape or form. Shape is the flat external outline of an image. Form is the three-dimensional version. Shape can be either geometric or shapes that have names, like circles, squares, triangles, or they can be organic, like the shapes to the right. Shapes can also be used to represent something or be symbolic. Most of the shape that we use in design will be either shape, not form, or used to represent something or be symbolic. As a really good example of representational shapes, we have to look at something like a heart. Normally, if you asked any elementary school student to draw a heart, they would draw the red version on the left-hand side of the screen. If you asked a doctor to draw a heart, they might actually draw the one on the right-hand side of the screen. Totally different, yet symbolic. Speaking of hearts, this is a nice one from Jim Dine. Our third element of art is actually color. Color is the sensation from the reflection or absorption of light by a surface. Sometimes color can also be called hue. There's different kinds of colors, and in this next slide we're going to be referencing the color wheel, which is very important to designers. This should be a larger view from your elementary days, but really truly the color wheel has 3 main sets of colors. The first ones are the primary colors, or red, blue, and yellow. The second set of colors are actually the secondary colors, that is orange, green, and violet. And the third set are those colors that are in between both the primary and the secondary colors, and they're called the tertiary colors. Things like red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, violet. We also have to talk about the complementary colors. Those are colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. They're pairs like red and green, blue and orange, or yellow and violet. Think about your favorite sports team and why they might use complementary colors. Our next element of art is texture. Texture is the surface quality or appearance of an object. Texture can be real, like this cup and saucer, or it can be implied, or what we call visual texture. That would be the picture of this cup and saucer. It's texture that you can see but can't feel. Most of the time, designers deal with visual texture. Our final element of art is value. Value is really the lightness or darkness of a color. Believe it or not, gray and black and white are not colors, they're actually values. Value is most often used to show depth on a two-dimensional picture plane, sometimes referred to as shading. When you take that value scale and apply it to a color on the color wheel, you get two kinds of colors. Tints, that would be a color plus white. In this instance, if you added white to red, you would get its tint, pink, or shades. That's when you add a color plus black. In this example, the color would be maroon or burgundy, or red plus black. This painting by Wesley Kandinsky contains all 5 of the elements. Let's review. The 5 elements of art are line, shape, color, texture, and value. Take a few moments to look at this painting and see if you can find all 5 of those elements inside. So now that we know something about the elements of art, which are the mark-making pieces that you can use in a work of art, now we have to learn about the rules or the laws that govern those. Those are actually called the principles of design. And these are incredibly important when making art because these are what make your work interesting. When we refer to these, we're actually talking about composition and how you can use them for a more interesting composition. The first principle is balance. Balance is the equilibrium of various elements in a work of art. Balance in art can be achieved in 3 different ways. The first kind of balance can be achieved through the equal distribution of elements on both sides of an imaginary line. That is called symmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance means if I took and cut this piece of digital art in half, both sides would be the same. They would mirror each other, therefore creating symmetry. The second kind of balance is called asymmetrical balance. If we did the exact same thing to this Van Gogh painting, we would only find that our balance is achieved through unequal distribution on each side of an imaginary line. Therefore, both sides are different. So we see in this painting this large black spire on one side and the moon on the other side, therefore not the same. The third way to achieve balance in a work of art is to have both the sides and the top and bottom have equal distribution on both sides of an imaginary line. Therefore, if you cut this image in half, both vertically and horizontally, all sections would be the same. They would mirror each other completely. This is known as radial balance. The second principle of design is contrast. Contrast is the difference between the elements of art. Here, in this image by Robert Longo, high contrast is used to emphasize differences. The contrast that we're talking about here in this image is actually value. The value scale from white to black is very different, therefore making a very high contrast composition. Using the same element of value in this photograph, low contrast is used to de-emphasize differences. Therefore, this picture looks overall very gray or the same value. That would be low contrast, a very good example. A really great way to tell is to squint at something if you're unsure if it's high or low contrast. If you squint at an image and you see great differences, it means it is high contrast. Our next design principle is emphasis. Emphasis means that one thing becomes the center of interest. Something is lighter, or brighter, or larger than everything else. In this image, it would be obviously the human eye. If you get nothing out of this class other than this particular design principle, I'll be happy. Emphasis really is one of the most important, and you have to consider it in what we call the rule of thirds. So what you need to do is picture a tic-tac-toe board over the top of your image, any image. It has 3 equal parts. Where the lines intersect, that would be the best place in your artwork to place your center of interest. This can be done with any kind of artwork, film and TV, drawings, whatever. A really great example of the rule of thirds is this image. You'll see where the tic-tac-toe board has been superimposed over the top of the picture. You'll notice that the photographer put that flower image right in that rule of thirds where those 2 boxes cross over, right there in those crosshairs. That would be the best use of emphasis, is to make your composition more interesting. The next principle of design is unity. Unity is the harmony of all of the elements in a composition. This one gets a little bit trickier to do. So what I've done is I've sort of broken it up into 2 smaller subcategories. The subcategories of unity are variety, which consists of differences in scale, surface, line, shape, value, and proportion. Proportion actually deals with the size relationship of one part to another. So in this image by Yves Tanguy, he's put in a variety of different shapes and a variety of different sizes to help us with the unity of the composition. Our next principle of design is repetition. Repetition is the use of one of the elements in more than one place in a composition. Pattern is a really great use of repetition. This is a incredible painting by Andy Warhol of his Coke bottles, using repetition. 2 other ways to use repetition would be with rhythm. This is the repeated use of similar elements to smoothly transition from one part to another. So if we're looking at this photograph, you notice that the lines of the stairway railing sort of make our eye go down into a spiral. That would be a very good example of repetition using rhythm. And finally, visual movement can also be achieved using repetition. This great wave print by Hokusai uses that to sort of move our eye from the right side of the print up and into that wave with those little fingers and back down to the boats that are sort of trying to escape this great wave. In conclusion, the principles of design are as follows: balance, contrast, emphasis, repetition, and unity. Use these in every design that you make, and you will never create an uninteresting piece of art. Now that you know what both the elements and principles are, you'll need to move on to the assignments under each of the unit categories. Good luck!